The thing about betrayal is that it always comes wrapped in the voice you love most. I learned this on a Tuesday evening in October, sitting in my beat-up Honda outside Lydia's advertising agency, waiting to surprise her with dinner from that Italian place she liked. The window on the third floor was cracked open, and voices drifted down like autumn leaves, except these particular leaves were poisonous. "There are no feelings between us," Lydia was saying, her laugh bright and cruel. "He's just my walking wallet. Ethan thinks he's so clever with his little consulting business, but honestly, Mike, he's pathetic. A middle-aged man playing dress-up in the big leagues." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Mike Vaughn, her boss, the family man with the perfect smile and the corner office. "What about the husband?" Vaughn's voice was smooth, practiced. "Doesn't he suspect anything? Ethan? Please. He's too busy trying to impress clients who barely tolerate him. Besides, I've got him convinced I'm working late most nights. The man's so desperate to believe I still care that he'll swallow any story I feed him." I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, listening to them discuss my marriage like it was a business transaction, which, apparently, it was. The takeout containers grew cold in my lap, while my wife of 15 years dissected my failures with surgical precision. When I finally drove home to our house on Maple Street, the house I'd been paying the mortgage on while she played house with her boss, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder, more calculating. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Lydia wouldn't be home for hours, not if she was maintaining her cover story about working late. I walked through rooms that suddenly felt like a museum of my own stupidity. Wedding photos on the mantel, anniversary gifts I'd bought her scattered on shelves, a life built on lies I'd been too trusting to see. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my home office, staring at bank statements and credit card bills. Lydia had expensive tastes: designer clothes, spa treatments, lunches at restaurants I couldn't pronounce, all funded by my consulting work, my late nights, my desperate attempts to keep us afloat while she played corporate games with her boss. The laptop sat open on my desk, still logged into our joint email account. I'd set it up years ago for convenience, back when we actually shared things. Now it felt like surveillance equipment. Her messages told a story I wished I didn't understand. Months of correspondence with Mike Vaughn that started professional and gradually turned personal. Lunch meetings that became dinner meetings, business trips that included romantic getaways, and running through it all, a constant thread of contempt for me. "Ethan's working late again," she'd written just last week. "Perfect. Gives us more time together." Another message. "He actually thinks his little presentations matter. It's almost sweet how hard he tries." And the worst one, from 3 days ago. "Don't worry about him finding out. Ethan sees what he wants to see. He's completely clueless." I closed the laptop and finished my bourbon. Then I opened it again and started taking screenshots. By the time Lydia came home at midnight, smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine, I had a complete picture of my marriage. She kissed my cheek with lips that had been kissing someone else, told me she loved me with a voice that had been mocking me hours earlier, and went to bed like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I just hadn't told her yet. The next morning, I called in sick to my biggest client. Lydia left for work with her usual routine: coffee, toast, a distracted goodbye kiss that felt like a business handshake. The moment her car disappeared around the corner, I got to work. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. First, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find: printed emails, credit card statements, phone records. I organized them in folders like I was preparing for the most important presentation of my career. Which, in a way, I was. Then I visited our bank, froze the joint accounts, transferred my direct deposits to a new account in my name only. canceled the credit cards she used for her expensive lunches and shopping trips. The house felt different as I worked, like I was seeing it clearly for the first time in months. The expensive perfume on her dresser that I'd never bought her, the lingerie in her drawer that she'd never worn for me, the phone that she guarded like state secrets. I was in the kitchen making lunch when she called. "Ethan, what did you do to our accounts?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "My card was declined at lunch." "I secured our assets," I said calmly, stirring soup on the stove. Seemed like the responsible thing to do. "What are you talking about? Secured them from what?" "From further unauthorized use. I'll explain when you get home." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "Ethan, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Nothing's going on, Lydia. I'm just taking better care of our finances. We'll talk tonight." I hung up and went back to my soup. It tasted better than anything I'd eaten in months. She came home early that day, bursting through the front door like a storm system. I was waiting in the living room with a cardboard box beside my chair. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she demanded. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was when my card got declined in front of my colleagues?" "Your colleagues," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling Mike Vaughn now?" The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. Lydia had always been good at thinking on her feet. It's what made her successful in advertising. "I don't know what you're implying, but—" "I'm not implying anything." I gestured to the box. "I packed some of your things, thought you might need them." She looked at the box like it might explode. "Ethan, what is this about?" "It's about walking wallets and pathetic middle-aged men playing dress-up." I kept my voice level, conversational. "It's about working late and expensive tastes and business trips that aren't quite business." Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years, Lydia was speechless. "I know about Mike," I continued. "I know about the lunches and the hotels and the contempt. I know you think I'm clueless." She sank into the chair across from me, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Ethan, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very good at explanations, very creative, but I'm not interested in hearing them." "So what happens now?" Her voice was smaller, uncertain. I stood up and handed her the box. "Now you figure out if Mike Vaughn's wallet is bigger than mine." 3 days after Lydia moved out, I found myself at the Crooked Antler, a dive bar on the wrong side of downtown that served honest drinks to dishonest people. It seemed appropriate. Gina Collins was working the evening shift, her red hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. We'd known each other since college, back when the world seemed full of possibilities instead of betrayals. She poured me a bourbon without being asked. "You look like hell," she said, which was probably true. I hadn't been sleeping much. "Feel worse than I look." "That bad, huh?" She leaned against the bar, giving me her full attention. The Crooked Antler wasn't busy on Wednesday nights. "Want to talk about it?" I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the emails, the frozen accounts, the cardboard box. Gina listened without interrupting, occasionally refilling my glass. "So, she's staying with this Mike character?" she asked when I finished. "His penthouse downtown. Apparently, he's got better accommodations than our suburban house. And better money? Better everything, according to Lydia." I swirled the bourbon in my glass. 15 years, Gina. 15 years of marriage, and she threw it away for a corner office and a company car. Gina was quiet for a moment, wiping down glasses that were already clean. "You know what your problem is, Ethan? Enlighten me." "You're playing defense. She screwed you over, humiliated you, and you responded by—" "What? Freezing some bank accounts? That's not revenge, that's just damage control. What would you suggest?" Her smile was sharp as broken glass. "I'd suggest you stop being the victim and start being the villain. Don't get mad, get even, or better yet, get creative." I thought about that on the drive home. The house felt enormous and empty without Lydia's presence, but also cleaner somehow, like removing a stain I'd grown accustomed to living with. I spent the evening researching Mike Vaughn online, social media profiles, business articles, public records. The man had a carefully crafted image: successful executive, devoted family man, pillar of the community. His wife Jennifer was a pediatric nurse. They had 2 teenagers and a golden retriever named Max. Interesting how none of his public persona mentioned his taste for married employees. The next morning, I drove to Lydia's agency and parked across the street. I wasn't stalking exactly. I was conducting reconnaissance. There's a difference. At 12:30, Lydia emerged from the building with a younger man I didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, expensive suit. They walked close together, her hand on his arm, laughing at some private joke. This wasn't Mike Vaughn. This was someone new. I followed them to a restaurant 3 blocks away, staying far enough back to avoid detection. They sat at a window table, and I watched from my car as Lydia leaned across the table to touch his hand. The same gesture she'd used with me during our early dating days. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. Enjoying the show? I looked around the street, scanning for familiar faces. Nothing. Another message. She's got good taste in restaurants, expensive taste. A third. That's Nate Ralston, by the way, junior account executive, 28 years old, lives in the Riverside Apartments, Unit 4B. I typed back, "Who is this?" "A friend. Someone who thinks you deserve better than being a walking wallet." The messages stopped after that. I sat in my car, watching Lydia share dessert with her newest conquest, and wondered how many secrets my marriage had been hiding. That evening, I did more research. Nate Ralston had a robust social media presence, all designer clothes and expensive hobbies. His apartment building was definitely above his pay grade for a junior executive. Someone was supplementing his income. I also looked deeper into Mike Vaughn's finances. Public records showed some interesting patterns: frequent business trips that didn't correspond with company announcements, expensive restaurant charges that exceeded reasonable business meal costs, a paper trail that suggested Mike's taste for extramarital affairs extended beyond my wife. The next day, I received another anonymous text. "Coffee shop on 5th Street, 2 p.m. Come alone." I almost didn't go. The whole thing felt like a setup, and I'd had enough surprises for 1 week. But curiosity won out over caution. The coffee shop was crowded with the lunch rush crowd. I ordered a black coffee and found a corner table, scanning faces for anyone who looked like they might be my mysterious informant. "Ethan Harper?" I turned to see a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, with tired eyes and a nervous smile. She sat down across from me without invitation. "I'm Melanie Torres," she said. "I work with Lydia." "You're the one sending me texts?" She nodded. "I thought you should know what's really going on." "Which is?" Melanie glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned forward. "Lydia's not just having an affair with Mike Vaughn. She's running a whole operation. Mike promotes women he's sleeping with, gives them better accounts, bigger bonuses. Lydia's been his star pupil for over a year. And Nate? Side project. Lydia likes variety." Melanie's voice was bitter. "She's also been feeding Mike information about other employees, who's looking for new jobs, who's having personal problems, who might be vulnerable to his advances. She's like his talent scout." I sipped my coffee, processing this information. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I used to be one of those women, before Lydia came along and convinced Mike I wasn't worth his time anymore." She opened her purse and pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's on here: emails, photos, financial records, enough to destroy both of them." I took the drive, feeling its weight like a loaded weapon. "What do you want in return?" "I want them to pay for what they did, to me, to you, to Mike's wife, to everyone they've stepped on." Melanie stood up. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone with nothing left to lose." She left me sitting there with the flash drive and a decision to make. I could take the high road, file for divorce quietly, and try to rebuild my life. Or I could take Gina's advice and stop being the victim. That evening, I plugged in the flash drive and started reading. By midnight, I had a complete picture of Mike Vaughn's operation and Lydia's role in it. The corruption went deeper than simple adultery. There were kickbacks, insider trading, harassment, and enough financial impropriety to sink both their careers. But more importantly, I had a plan. The first phase of my plan required patience, which had never been my strong suit. But 15 years of marriage to Lydia had taught me the value of strategic thinking. I started with Mike Vaughn's wife, Jennifer. Not directly. That would have been cruel and obvious. Instead, I created an anonymous email account and sent her a single photograph. Mike and Lydia kissing in the parking lot of the Riverside Hotel, timestamp clearly visible. No message, no explanation. Just the photo and a subject line. Thought you should know. Then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. Jennifer Vaughn filed for divorce 3 days later, citing irreconcilable differences. The local business journal picked up the story because Mike was a prominent figure in the advertising community. Suddenly, his carefully crafted family man image was front-page news. Phase 2 involved Nate Ralston's finances. According to Melanie's files, he was receiving mysterious cash deposits that didn't match his salary. A little digging revealed these came from a shell company owned by Mike Vaughn. Essentially, Mike was paying for Lydia's boy toy. I forwarded this information to the IRS fraud hotline and the State Ethics Commission. Let them sort out the tax implications. But the real masterpiece was Phase 3. Lydia's agency was bidding on a major contract with Henderson Industries, a manufacturing company looking to rebrand their image. The presentation was scheduled for Friday afternoon, and according to her emails, Lydia was confident about winning. She should have been. She'd been sleeping with the client's marketing director for 2 months. I knew this because Melanie had provided me with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and enough photographic evidence to stock a small museum. Lydia wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating on Mike, who was cheating on his wife. It was like a Russian nesting doll of betrayal. Wednesday evening, I sent an anonymous package to Henderson Industries' CEO. Photos, receipts, email printouts, and a typed note explaining that his marketing director was compromising the bidding process for personal gratification. By Thursday morning, the marketing director was suspended pending investigation. By Thursday afternoon, Henderson Industries had canceled their search for a new agency entirely. Lydia called me that evening, her voice shaking with rage. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I'm having dinner," I said calmly, cutting into a perfectly good steak. "What are you talking about?" "The Henderson account. Someone sabotaged our presentation." "That's unfortunate. Maybe you should look into your security procedures." "This was you, wasn't it? You're trying to destroy my career." I chewed thoughtfully. "Lydia, I'm a freelance consultant who designs marketing materials for small businesses. I don't have the connections or influence to sabotage major corporate deals." "Then how—" "Maybe you just picked the wrong client to manipulate." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove anything. I'm not the one sleeping with clients to win contracts." She hung up then, but I wasn't finished. Friday morning, I received a call from Tom Bradley, one of my oldest clients and the owner of a small manufacturing firm. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." "Shoot." "Is it true that your wife has been spreading rumors about your work? About your reliability?" My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of rumors?" "I got a call yesterday from someone claiming to be a former client of yours. Said you'd missed deadlines, delivered substandard work, had drinking problems. Wanted to warn me before I renewed your contract." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Tom, you've worked with me for 5 years. Have I ever missed a deadline or delivered poor work? No, never. That's why the call seemed strange. But Ethan, if someone's trying to sabotage your business, I'll handle it, I said. Thanks for the heads up. After I hung up, I sat in my home office staring at the wall. Lydia wasn't just defending herself, she was going on the offensive, trying to destroy my livelihood the same way I was dismantling hers. The difference was, I had better ammunition. I called Melanie and arranged another meeting, this time at a restaurant across town. She arrived looking nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. "This is getting dangerous," she said. "Mike's starting to ask questions about who might have access to his emails." "Let him ask. Do you have what I requested?" She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Employee records going back 3 years. Every woman Mike's promoted, transferred, or given special projects to. The pattern's pretty clear once you see it laid out." I opened the envelope and scanned the documents. 12 women, all young, all attractive, all recipients of Mike's professional attention. And according to the dates, several of their promotions coincided with Lydia's involvement in Mike's operation. "This is perfect," I said. "What are you planning?" I smiled, and Melanie actually leaned back in her chair. "I'm planning to give Mike Vaughn the recognition he deserves." That evening, I spent 3 hours crafting an email that would have made my old journalism professors proud. Detailed, factual, devastating. I sent copies to the agency's board of directors, the local business journal, and the state attorney general's office. Subject line: pattern of harassment and financial impropriety at T-Bold Advertising. I attached Melanie's employee records, financial documents showing Mike's shell company payments, and enough photographic evidence to illustrate the scope of his operation. Then I sat back and waited for the storm to hit. It didn't take long. By Saturday morning, the Business Journal had published a preliminary story. By Sunday, 3 more women had come forward with their own stories about Mike Vaughn's management style. Monday morning, Mike was suspended pending a full investigation. Tuesday, Lydia was terminated for her role in the scheme. Wednesday, I received a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Harper, this is Detective Sarah Morrison with the City Police. We'd like to speak with you about some anonymous tips we've been receiving." My stomach dropped. "What kind of tips?" "Tips about corporate misconduct, harassment, fraud, the kind of tips that show an unusual level of inside knowledge about T-Bold Advertising's operations." "I see. Would you be available to come in for a conversation this afternoon?" I looked around my home office at the files and photographs and printed emails that had become my war room. Of course, happy to help however I can. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and realized I might have pushed too far, too fast. But it was too late to change course now. The storm I'd unleashed was bigger than I'd anticipated, and I was about to find out if I could survive it. Detective Morrison turned out to be a compact woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of patience that made guilty people confess to crimes they hadn't committed. We sat in a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. "Mr. Harper, how well do you know Mike Vaughn?" she asked. "I know he was my wife's boss, ex-wife technically, since our divorce was finalized last week." "And Nate Ralston?" "Never met him personally. I understand he worked at the same agency." She consulted her notes. "We've received several anonymous tips over the past 2 weeks. Tips that led to Mr. Vaughn's suspension and your ex-wife's termination. Tips that showed remarkable insight into their personal and professional relationships." I kept my expression neutral. I imagine a lot of people knew what was going on. Office affairs aren't usually as secret as people think they are. That's true, but these tips included financial records, hotel receipts, private emails, the kind of information that would be difficult for casual observers to obtain. Maybe someone with access to their computers or files, a disgruntled employee? Detective Morrison leaned back in her chair. Mr. Harper, I'm going to be direct with you. We know you've been conducting your own investigation into your ex-wife's activities. We know about the frozen bank accounts, the anonymous emails, the information packets sent to various organizations. My mouth went dry, but I managed to keep my voice steady. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. She opened a folder and spread several photographs across the table. These are surveillance photos from various locations over the past month. Hotels, restaurants, parking lots. You appear in several of them. The photos showed me following Lydia and her various companions, sitting in my car outside restaurants, walking into buildings where I had no legitimate business. Seen together, they painted a picture of obsessive surveillance. Detective, I think I need to contact a lawyer. That's your right. But before you do, let me tell you why I'm really here. She gathered the photos back into the folder. Mike Vaughn and your ex-wife have filed harassment complaints against you. They claim you've been stalking them, interfering with their business relationships, and conducting a campaign of intimidation. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like a man whose marriage fell apart decided to take revenge on everyone he blamed for his problems. I stared at her across the small table, realizing how badly I'd miscalculated. In my focus on destroying Lydia and Mike, I'd left myself exposed to exactly this kind of counterattack. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to stop. Whatever you're doing, whoever you're working with, whatever your endgame is, I want it to end now. Because if it doesn't, if we get one more complaint, one more anonymous tip, one more mysterious package delivered to someone's office, I'm going to arrest you for harassment and stalking. And if I agree to stop, then maybe this whole thing goes away quietly. Maybe everyone involved decides they've had enough drama for one lifetime. I nodded slowly. I understand. I hope you do, Mr. Harper, because next time we meet, it won't be for a friendly conversation. I drove home in a daze, realizing how completely I'd been outmaneuvered. Lydia and Mike had turned my own tactics against me, painting me as the aggressor while positioning themselves as victims. It was brilliant, really, and probably effective. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was working alone. That evening, I called Melanie and arranged to meet at the Crooked Antler. Gina was working the bar, and the place was busy enough to provide cover for a private conversation. We have a problem, I told Melanie once we'd found a corner booth. I heard about the police visit. Mike's been bragging about it all day. He thinks he's won? He thinks you're finished, neutralized. He's already talking about getting his job back once the investigation clears him. I sipped my bourbon, thinking. What about the other women, the ones who came forward? Scared. Mike's lawyer has been contacting them, suggesting they might have misunderstood his professional interest. A few have already recanted their statements. So he's going to walk away from this? Melanie nodded grimly. Rich men with good lawyers usually do. I looked across the bar at Gina, who was serving drinks and laughing with customers. She caught my eye and winked, the same conspiratorial gesture she'd been using since college. Melanie, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. How did you know to contact me? How did you know about my situation with Lydia? She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I told you. I work with her. I heard things. But how did you get my phone number? How did you know where I'd be that day at the coffee shop? Her discomfort increased. I looked you up online. Found your business information. I leaned forward. Melanie, who else have you been talking to about this situation? No one. I swear. But her eyes flickered toward the bar, toward Gina, and suddenly pieces started falling into place. The anonymous text messages that had started everything. The detailed information about Nate Ralston. The perfect timing of Melanie's approach. How long have you known Gina Collins? I asked. Melanie's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. I kept my voice calm, conversational. You've been working together from the beginning, haven't you? This whole thing, the evidence, the plan, the anonymous tips. It wasn't about getting revenge on Mike and Lydia. Ethan, you're being paranoid. Am I? Because it's starting to look like I've been played by experts. I finished my bourbon and stood up. Tell Gina I said hello. I left Melanie sitting in the booth and walked to the bar. Gina was mixing drinks for a group of college students, her movements efficient and practiced. We need to talk, I said. She glanced at me, then at Melanie's table. Now's not a good time. Make time. Something in my voice must have convinced her, because she called over the other bartender and led me to a small office behind the bar. The space was cramped and cluttered with invoices and liquor receipts. What's this about? She asked. It's about 15 years ago when we were in college. It's about that night at the fraternity party when you thought something was going to happen between us, and I left with someone else instead. Gina's expression didn't change, but her hands clenched slightly. Ancient history. Is it? Because it seems like you've been carrying a grudge for a very long time. Long enough to orchestrate an elaborate revenge scheme that would destroy my marriage, my ex-wife's career, and probably my freedom. You're giving me too much credit. Am I? Let's see. You knew about my marriage problems before I did, thanks to Melanie's inside information. You encouraged me to take revenge instead of taking the high road. You provided emotional support and tactical advice while I systematically destroyed everyone involved. And now, just when things are getting dangerous for me, the police show up with evidence of harassment and stalking. Gina sat down behind the cluttered desk. Prove it. I don't need to prove it. I just need to understand it. I leaned against the doorframe. The question is, what happens now? Now you walk away. You take Detective Morrison's advice, you stop your little war, and you try to rebuild your life. While you and Melanie disappear back into the woodwork? While everyone gets what they deserve. I studied her face, looking for traces of the woman I'd known in college. She was still there, underneath the years, and the bitterness and the carefully planned revenge. What I don't understand, I said, is why you involved so many innocent people. Mike's wife, the other women at the agency, even Mike and Lydia themselves. Whatever they did to me, they didn't deserve to have their lives destroyed. Didn't they? Gina's composure finally cracked. Mike Vaughn has been preying on vulnerable women for years. Lydia enabled him and profited from it. They built their success on other people's pain. And me? What did I build my success on? You? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You built your success on being oblivious, on being so self-absorbed that you couldn't see what was happening in your own marriage, your own life, your own past. Meaning? Meaning you never even remembered that night at the party. You never remembered leading me on, making me think I mattered to you, then abandoning me for someone prettier and more popular. You never remembered because it didn't matter to you. I stared at her, trying to recall details from 15 years ago. Fragments came back. A party, too much beer, a conversation that went longer than it should have. But I couldn't remember specifics, couldn't remember promises made or expectations created. Gina, if I hurt you back then, you didn't hurt me, Ethan. You erased me. You made me invisible. And then you went on with your life like I'd never existed. So this was all about college? About something that happened when we were kids? This was about justice. For me, for Melanie, for every woman Mike Vaughn manipulated. For every person like you who goes through life taking what they want without considering the consequences. I opened the office door, suddenly needing air and space and distance from the weight of her anger. Where are you going? She called after me. To figure out how to clean up the mess we've all made. But as I walked out of the Crooked Antler and into the cool evening air, I realized the mess was bigger than any of us could clean up. And the consequences were just beginning. The thing about playing chess with someone smarter than you is that you don't realize you're losing until it's too late to change the outcome. I learned this the hard way over the next 3 days, as my carefully constructed revenge plot collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. First, Mike Vaughn's lawyer contacted me directly, a polished shark in an expensive suit who explained, in terms even I could understand, that continued harassment of his client would result in both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that would leave me financially ruined for the rest of my natural life. Second, 3 of my remaining consulting clients canceled their contracts, citing concerns about my professional stability. Apparently, word had spread through the business community that I was involved in some kind of corporate espionage scandal. Third, Lydia herself showed up at my door on Thursday evening, looking composed and confident in a way I hadn't seen since before our marriage imploded. "We need to talk," she said, walking past me into the living room like she still lived there. "I thought we'd said everything that needed saying." "That was before you decided to destroy half the advertising industry." She sat down in her old chair, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "Ethan, you need to stop this before it gets worse." "Worse for whom?" "For you. Mike and I are going to be fine. We have lawyers, resources, connections. You have what? A grudge and a drinking problem?" I poured myself a bourbon from the bar cart, mainly to have something to do with my hands. "I have the truth." "The truth?" She laughed, and it was the same bright, cruel sound I'd heard from her office window. "The truth is that you're a middle-aged man who couldn't handle losing his wife to someone more successful. The truth is that you've been stalking us, harassing us, and interfering with our lives because you can't accept that our marriage was over long before I met Mike. Our marriage was over because you were cheating. Our marriage was over because you stopped being interesting. You stopped growing, stopped challenging yourself, stopped being the man I married." She leaned forward, her voice softening into something that might have been pity. "Ethan, I tried to love you. For years I tried to find reasons to stay interested in our life together. But you made it so hard. By working to support us? By trying to build a future together? By being content with mediocrity? By settling for small clients and small dreams and a small life in a small house on a street full of people just like us?" I sipped my bourbon and studied her face. Even now, even after everything, she was beautiful. It was easy to see why Mike Vaughn and Nate Ralston and whoever else had been willing to risk their careers for her attention. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now, you stop. You call off whatever dogs you've set on us. You stop sending anonymous tips to reporters and government agencies, and you let us rebuild our lives. And in return? In return, we don't press charges. We don't sue you for harassment. We don't make sure that every potential client in the city knows exactly what kind of man they'd be hiring." It was a good offer, probably better than I deserved, considering how far I'd pushed things. But there was something in her tone, something in the way she was sitting in my living room making demands, that reminded me why I'd started this war in the first place. "There's just one problem with your offer," I said. "Which is? I'm not the one you need to negotiate with." Her confidence flickered, just for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I haven't been running this operation alone. And I'm not the one who's been feeding information to the authorities. Then who? Ask Melanie Torres. Ask her about her relationship with Gina Collins. Ask her about what really happened to end her career at your agency." Lydia's face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I? Because it seems to me that you've been so focused on Mike's enemies that you forgot to watch out for your own." She stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking. "This isn't over." "No," I agreed. "I don't think it is." After she left, I sat in the quiet house and tried to figure out my next move. The smart play was to take her deal, walk away, and try to rebuild my consulting business from scratch. The problem was I wasn't sure I could trust any of them to keep their word. My phone rang at 9 o'clock. Unknown number. "Hello, Ethan." Gina's voice was calm, almost cheerful. "How was your conversation with Lydia? You were watching the house?" "I was in the neighborhood. Did she make you an offer?" "She did. The question is whether I should take it. That depends on what you want out of this situation." I walked to the window and looked out at the street. Normal houses, normal lives, normal people who probably weren't plotting elaborate revenge schemes against their ex-wives. "What I want," I said, "is to understand why you really did this. And don't tell me it was about college or justice or any of that. Tell me the real reason." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then, "The real reason is that I was bored." Bored? Bored with serving drinks to people who don't see me. Bored with watching everyone else live interesting lives while I stayed in the background. Bored with being invisible. "So you decided to play puppet master with real people's lives?" "I decided to see if I could, and it turns out I'm very good at it. Good enough to destroy Mike Vaughn's career, good enough to end my marriage." "Your marriage was already over, Ethan. I just gave it a push off the cliff." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the past month settling on my shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now you have a choice. You can take Lydia's deal and disappear quietly, or you can help me finish what we started." "Which is?" "Making sure Mike Vaughn never hurts anyone else. Making sure Lydia pays for what she's done. Making sure justice actually gets served for once." "And if I refuse?" "Then you take your chances with the police, the lawyers, and the court of public opinion. Without my protection, without Melanie's testimony, without any of the evidence we've been providing." It was checkmate, delivered with the same casual tone she'd used to announce last call at the bar. I'd been outplayed from the beginning, maneuvered into a position where all my choices led to the same outcome. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Tomorrow night, there's a charity gala at the Riverside Hotel. Mike will be there, trying to rehabilitate his image. Lydia will be there as his date, playing the role of supportive partner. All their friends, colleagues, and business associates will be watching. And that's where we're going to give them the recognition they deserve." The next evening, I put on my best suit and drove to the Riverside Hotel. The charity gala was in full swing, the ballroom filled with the kind of people who wrote large checks to feel better about their comfortable lives. I spotted Mike and Lydia near the bar, working the room like the professionals they were. Mike looked confident, relaxed, like a man who'd weathered a minor storm and emerged stronger. Lydia was radiant in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They made a beautiful couple. It was easy to see why people believed their story about finding love in the workplace, about overcoming obstacles to be together. I ordered a drink and waited for Gina's signal. It came at exactly 9 o'clock when the charity's director took the stage to thank the evening's sponsors. The lights dimmed, and a slideshow began playing on the large screens around the ballroom. At first, it looked like a normal presentation. Photos of the charity's work, statistics about their impact, testimonials from grateful recipients. But then, the images changed. Hotel receipts, email printouts, bank records, photographs of Mike with various women over the past 3 years, audio recordings of conversations that should have been private. The ballroom fell silent as the evidence played out on screens visible from every angle. Mike's face went white, then red, then white again. Lydia grabbed his arm, whispering urgently in his ear, but the presentation wasn't finished. The final section focused on Lydia specifically, her role in Mike's operation, her manipulation of clients and colleagues, her contempt for the husband who'd supported her career while she built her success on lies and betrayal. The last slide was a photo of us on our wedding day, young and hopeful and completely unaware of how the story would end. Below it, in simple white text, were the words she'd spoken from her office window. "He's just my walking wallet." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the lights came up, and chaos erupted. People were shouting, pointing, demanding explanations. Security guards were moving toward the stage, trying to figure out who was responsible for hijacking their presentation. In the confusion, I lost sight of Mike and Lydia. By the time I made it through the crowd to where they'd been standing, they were gone. I found them in the hotel parking lot, arguing beside Mike's car. "This is your fault," Lydia was saying. "Your stupid revenge scheme brought all this attention." "My revenge scheme?" Mike's voice was incredulous. "You're the one who wanted to destroy him completely. I was willing to let it go after the divorce. Well, now we're both destroyed, thanks to your brilliant strategy." They noticed me approaching and fell silent. "Quite a show in there," I said. "You did this," Mike said. "You and whoever you've been working with." "Actually, I think you did this to yourselves. I just provided the documentation." Lydia stepped toward me, her beautiful face twisted with rage. "You pathetic little man. Do you think this makes you the winner? Do you think destroying us somehow validates your sad excuse for a life?" "I think," I said carefully, "that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences take a while to catch up with you." "This isn't over," Mike said. "Yes," I replied, "it is." I walked away from them, through the parking lot and into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear them still arguing, still trying to figure out how to salvage something from the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. My phone buzzed with a text message from Gina. "Well played." I typed back, "Was it worth it?" Her response came immediately. "Ask me in a year." I drove home through empty streets, past houses where normal people were living normal lives, unburdened by elaborate revenge schemes and the weight of their own poor choices. The house was dark and quiet when I arrived. I poured myself one last bourbon and sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence of everything I'd lost and everything I'd learned. Tomorrow, I would start over. New clients, new projects, new possibilities. The consulting business would recover, eventually. My reputation would heal, given time and honest work. But tonight, I sat in the darkness and thought about walking wallets and invisible bartenders and the price we all pay for the choices we make. Outside, it started to rain, washing the streets clean for whatever came next.